सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्. So Julie is going to summarize for us today.
Yes, I will, Shashi ji. Hari Om, everyone. Namaste. So last week we concluded chapter 6 and we started the beautiful chapter 7, which is the Jnana Vijnana or Yoga. Bhagavan took the focus away from us, jivas, and enlightened us about meditation, turning the attention to Paratma. In concluding shloka of chapter 6, when Arjuna asks Krishna that, why is the mind so chanchalam? Chanchalam hi mana Krishna. So Krishna says that, Arjuna, don't be worried. I understand that the mind is always so chanchala and so fickle and restless and so difficult to control. And then Arjuna also had a question around, so we are on this path of meditation. What if we die? What happens? Are we, doing all this practice of meditation? Is all this going to go in vain? So Krishna says that, Arjuna, don't worry about it. And Lord tells us that, we can, even though the mind is so chanchala and so fickle, we can still get the mind under control through meditation, through repeated practice, and dispassion. So that is Viveka, Abhyasa, and Vairagya. And with this patience, practice, and understanding of the mind can be controlled. The God also goes on to enlightening us that the true nature of this mind is to be peaceful. But the various factors that come in and cause these agitations are our desires, our pleasures, our ego, and being attached to material things that causes the mind to get agitated. Now, as we start listening to Vedanta and Satsang, or continue on this path of Abhyasa, of making, the detachment as our priority and trying to calm the mind down, happiness, we will find out that happiness is the true state of the mind. The mind always wants to be happy. Now, as the mind attaches to the higher elevated thoughts in our own self, slowly and slowly we will learn to detach from these agitated thoughts. So meditation and certainly the abhyasa are two main components that was focused on chapter 6 by Krishna. So he continues to reassure us, Krishna continues to reassure us that when a jiva dies, this practice is never going to go to a waste. When the person dies, there are two things that may happen. A person who has not learned the practice of calming the mind, will die, go to heaven, and then once the punya karma is done, he's born back again into this, into a family where, the mind is again going to be agitated and, will be forced to, learn to practice to control it and go on that path, start from wherever they left off. But when a jiva who is already practicing meditation and has no desires dies, that jiva is quickly reborn into a family of yogis, and that environment is so conducive that wherever the jiva left off the abhyasa, the jiva gets to start from there on. So it kind of helps the jiva, the environment helps the jiva to continue moving forward in the path of meditation and spiritualism. So that concluded our chapter 6. Chapter 7, Jnana Vijnana Yoga, Krishna says that there are two aspects to Bhagavan, Ishvara, the lower and the higher aspects. The lower Prakriti, or the lower nature, it comprises of 5 elements, the earth, the water, the fire, space, and air. And plus, it also has the mind, ego, and intellect component in it. But the higher nature, which is the higher prakriti, that comprises of life-giving forces, which is actually the ultimate truth, the higher life-giving forces. Ishvara is the ultimate cause of this universe. That helps us to understand that. As the origin and cause of the universe, the Bhagavan pervades in all things. Like I think we discussed the example of a necklace where the string pervades the beads in the necklace. So Bhagavan similarly is in every component that we see in this: the trees, the space, the air. God is there everywhere, and the consciousness is there everywhere. And without God, all of this wouldn't exist. So when we train our mind to learn to appreciate all of these small little things in our life, we remember the presence of God, who is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. So selfless action, and through all dharmic desires for everyone's benefit, if we train our mind to do this and continue on the path of meditation, we will experience this higher prakriti. And when we have the true understanding of all of this and the practice, we realize that the aham brahmasmi, the chaitanya in me. And this is where we stopped, I think, but this is the starting to the Vijnanam Yoga. And this concludes my notes. Shashiji, I may have represented some things wrong, so please do correct me if I've represented anything wrongly.
No, everything was very good, Julie. Excellent. All of you do such a good job. I'm very happy. Sounds good. The in this, just a little bit of clarification, because we don't have to go into all those real fine details, but sometimes what Bhagwan does is, look, I'll show you in my talk now, so you'll see that as well. But he talks about the lower prakriti, which you mentioned, absolutely, the 5 elements and the mind intellect complex. It's all matter, energy, matter, energy, matter, energy. You're absolutely right. And then beyond that, he also adds a higher prakriti, which is the life in us, the life force in us. Okay. And beyond that is the supreme Satchit Ananda. So there's Satchit Ananda, and then a reflection of it in the subtle instrument, which is a mind intellect, or that type of instrument is called as the higher prakriti. And then is, of course, all the lower prakriti, which is everything that we see. So it's a little finer details. You don't have to worry, but sometimes the division is there. So just be aware and don't get confused. So the 7th chapter was, I'll just to sort of finalize a little bit more things there. As, Julie has mentioned, Bhagavan says, other than me, there's nothing. Mai sarvam idam protam sutre manigana. In me, all the things, all this variety of what you see is, like pearls on a string. And he says, so nothing is excluded. Then if nothing is excluded, if Bhagavan is so evident as he's pointing out to us, why then are we not able to appreciate Bhagavan? Why then are we, it's so hard. I mean, if it's every aspect of everything. So Bhagavan then actually has talked a little bit about Maya Shakti, which we will go into in other chapters. He says it is the Maya Shakti which actually makes us forget our true nature, and also makes us not appreciate the evident Paramatma who's everywhere. And so Maya has three gunas, the sattva, rajas, and tamas. We can call them the moods of the mind, but you see the expression of sattva, rajas, tamas everywhere. And that is the cause for us not appreciating that truth which is already in me, and the truth and oneness which is everywhere, because it's very distracting. The variety it causes, it's so magical, it keeps us enraptured in that, he says. So when he says that, the question obviously will be, how then will we know you, Bhagwan? But always the Lord has answers. He says, you meditate on me. You know what all I told you before, the karma yoga and everything, and then you meditate, you'll come to me. But then some people might say, Bhagwan, that's a little too difficult sometimes. Is there any easy path? So then he says, yes, bhakti is a very easy. He says bhakti is sulabham, but bhakti sometimes is not easy. But anyway, so what we're going to see now, starting from that aspect, how do we get over Maya? If that path of knowledge, jnana, is little difficult for us to understand and to meditate and everything, what do? He says, I'll tell you about 4 types of devotees. With that, after saying that, he'll conclude the chapter and he introduces a few technical terms. So in this session, what we're going to see is we're going to see the conclusion of the 7 chapters with a shloka on the 4 types of devotees. Okay? And then we'll start the beginning of in fact, we'll conclude the 8th chapter completely today. That 8th chapter is called Akshara Brahma Yoga. It's sort of a very esoteric chapter compared to even what we studied before. This is sort of esoteric in the sense some technical terms are explained, because he has used those terms in 7th chapter and Arjuna is like, what? I'd never heard these before. What are you talking, Bhagwan? What are those words? You wanted to know me in totality, right, Arjuna? I'm going to explain using these terms. So he'll, just give brief explanations. We'll just see brief meanings of those terms that he used in 7th chapter to explain how totality is that Lord. So that we'll see. Then our question always, what happens after death? People ask. All of us should actually say what happens before death. That's more important, right? How we live this life. But anyway, we all have questions. What happens after death? And also, the question, how can I remember the Lord at the time of death? What can I do to remember? So Bhagwan will give us some techniques. He says either always practice meditation, or throughout what you do every day of your life during your Swadharma, you remember me. We'll sort of delve a little bit into that at the end. What is constant remembrance of Lord? We'll try to look into that. Then he'll say, look, in your life, we all do actions, right? Obviously, you're reaping consequences. These consequences the results are carried into your next life as well. So that meaning, where do I go then if I have done so many actions? What's my destination? And how can I go to that land of no return, Bhagwan, meaning I become one with you. So all these are covered in chapter 8. So technical terms are explained. What happens after death is explained. How can I remember you, Bhagwan, at the time of death? And then so to do that, practice of meditation, or remember me throughout whatever you do daily. That's the thing. And then where do I go? Which destination do I go to? He'll mention about Uttarayana and Dakshinayana Marga in this. And then where you don't return at all, just one totally with that Bhagwan. He'll explain all those things. So we'll go back to 7th chapter now. And Bhagwan is saying, look, sometimes if people say Jnana Marga is so difficult, it seems so dry, is there other ways? Hey, don't worry. There are 4 types of devotees who always think about me and come to me, and I'll tell you who these 4 types of devotees are and explain to you, okay? And who he loves the most. Okay. Whoever is going to repeat after me. Chaturvidha bhajante maam.
Chaturvidha bhajante maam.
Jana sukruti norjuna.
Jana sukruti norjuna.
Arto jignasurartharthi.
Arto jignasurartharthi.
Jnani cha bharatashabha.
Jnani cha bharatarsabha.
He says, I know, many people might not turn to me, but there are four types of devotees who always come to me with something or want me. Okay. And who are these? He says they're arthis, artharthis, jignasu, jnani. Artha bhaktas, artharthi bhaktas, jignasu bhakta, jnani bhakta. Right? So who are these arthis? Artha bhaktas or arthis are the ones who are in distress when they're suffering and they don't know where to turn. They turn to Bhagwan and say, you please help me. Those people are called as arthis. So they also turn to Bhagwan. And then there's another, whole group of people who even during prosperity, when things are going well, also they think of Bhagwan and they might also want more of such prosperity to go on forever. So they might be desirous of that. That is the artharthi. But they think of Bhagwan even when things are going well and they might want more of that. Now the jignasu is one who says, you know what? Who is this who has helped me through my distress? Who is helping me to gain prosperity? Who's with me all the time? Who is this God I'm praying to? So desirous of knowledge, of knowing that Bhagwan, the one who approaches Bhagwan is called Jignasu. But the Jnani knows who Bhagwan is. Jnani knows that Vijnana we heard in, earlier. That is, he knows that he or she knows, okay, I always have to remind myself, that person knows that not only this cause of this world, but everything of this world is that true reality self Satchidananda, who's my true nature. So not only I am that Satchidananda, the Jnani knows everything of this universe is Satchidananda, and so that Bhagwan, who's the cause, is my true nature alone. So the one who knows that is the enlightened one, but that person also doesn't want anything, just is overwhelmed with that, Bhagwan's power, Bhagwan's blessings, Bhagwan as that, immense source of everything. So understanding that connection is just praying to Bhagwan. So all of them are good, he says, Lord Krishna says, but who is so dear to me? The one who knows himself or herself as their own self. They are very dear to me and I'm very dear to them, is what he says. So meaning, and so this keeps on coming back to one thing, that if I can live with the understanding that there's an underlying oneness, so then how I look at everything, how I treat everything is in a completely different vision. So with that vision, when I look at everything, that person is so dear to Bhagwan because that person is trying to do their best in this world to live in a harmonious manner. That's why he says Jnani is the one who's most dear to me. But all the while remember, an Artha Bhakta who's going only to Bhagwan during distress might move on to become a Jignasu too. Meaning, who's this who's helping me in times of my distress? I want to know about that, entity. And then after, getting curious, might even, become enlightened to understand that I am that true self. All of us are making this journey. All of us are making this journey. So now it becomes very clear to us that this Bhagwan, who sometimes people would say, where is this God? Will say, please God help me to, oh, thank you God for everything. To say, who are you? And then, it's me, my own self. This is the journey of all of us. This is what he's pointing in this beautiful shloka of the four types of devotees. So now what happens at the end of the 7th chapter, Bhagavan all of a sudden uses some very, terms which Arjuna is not familiar with. So they seem like, what? What are these terms that Bhagavan is suddenly using? Because he did tell me in this, particular chapter that he's going to talk everything about myself. He said, I will say samagram, I'll tell you, and you'll have asamshaya knowledge after that. I'll tell you that he had said. And now he's saying, using all these words all of a sudden. So Arjuna is like, I wonder what these words are. So beginning in the now 8th chapter, what happens? Arjuna says, what are these terms that you used? What are these terms? The terms that are used are Brahma, Adhyatma, Karma, Adibhuta, Adidhaiva, Adiyajna. 6 terms he has used. So now Arjuna wants clarification on that. What exactly are these terms? Because you're saying this will encompass everything. This is me, God, is what now Lord Krishna has said. So now I want to know what is all included in you, Lord. And then, of course, in this chapter, we'll see at the time of departure from this world, how can I keep my mind on that Bhagavan? How difficult it is when we are going through catching our breath and suffering and all kinds of things are happening within the body. How on earth are we going to remember that Lord? So some beautiful hints are given in this as well. So let's just see the meaning of each one of these words without going into too much detail, but we'll get a comprehensive idea of what Bhagavan in totality means. Okay, so let's see. So if you remember, the 5 elements that we said are the lower nature of the Lord. That is the 5 elements in which also are included, remember, our mind, intellect, thought, they're all thoughts, which are nothing but energy waves. Matter, energy conversion always happens. So when we say 5 elements, included in it will be our thoughts as well. That subtle thing is also included in the lower Prakriti, Apara Prakriti. Then what is Para Prakriti? When consciousness is in proximity of an appropriate instrument, like if I go stand in front of a mirror, a reflection is going to happen. There's no other thing. Absolutely has to happen. Like that, when consciousness, Satchidananda, is in proximity to our mind, intellect, equipment, which is extreme subtle matter, a reflection happens. That is life. That is the life. Appropriately it should happen. That is life. And then it energizes and gives life to rest of the body. So first, in presence of consciousness. Then appropriate instrument. Mind, intellect, that's a subtle thought, wave, energy. That should be in front of that consciousness. Of course, there should be a physical body where everything can express. Then that lends life to everything. So, but here is where the reflection life happens. This is called para. But above that, of course, is pure consciousness. So as we see now, Bhagavan is going to explain what these are. So that supreme truth, that Om there, that is called as Brahman. That is imperishable, eternal, changeless, your true nature, my true nature, and the underlying substratum of this entire universe. And beyond is this Satchid Ananda, truth. Okay, that reality. You want to call it self, you call it self. You want to call it Satchidananda, you call it that. You want to call it Brahman, you call it that. That is Brahman. That's the first word he explained. And then when the creation is brought into, that is the first thing. The second thing is the same Brahman, which is everywhere, Satchidananda, when it is in an individual like you and me, that is called Atma or Adhyatma, because that's the word Bhagavan used here. The individual, the presence of Satchidananda in you and me, that consciousness is called Adhyatma. Okay. So this Adhyatma or Atma is sometimes called Sakshi, sometimes called because of its presence, I get to know everything. If it was not there in me, this body is matter, right? But because of it, I get to know everything. It's also called knower. It's called illuminator. Don't go into too much, but anyway, I'm just explaining in case you hear. But Atma, concerned with an individual, the same or everywhere is Brahman. Okay, those two things. Then what happens? Now, karma, we had studied, any action. We studied a lot about it in the 3rd chapter, a little bit in the 4th chapter and everything. Now here, once the creation has come into place, that has to be sustained, right? So the creation, act of creation, plus maintaining it, sustaining it, is particularly referred to as karma. So all this is coming under what? You don't forget that totality, that one totality, God. I am everything, Krishna is saying. I am that Brahman. In you and I express as Atma. And the whole expanse of this creation which has come is because of me. The whole thing which is being maintained, are because of me again. And the whole thing is a process of sacrifice. Sacrifice. We studied this in the 3rd chapter. Sacrifice constantly happening. This karma is a sacrifice. It's like this. We give birth to a baby, okay? We created that baby, wonderful. But afterwards, how much of is involved? It's all sacrifice in making sure that that individual is able to stand on their feet. You see? So it's exactly like that. Bhagavan brings this creation into, place and then sustains it by a process of sacrifice. That in this specifically, he calls it karma to show us, I'm not doing just small karma. Look at this. Is what he says. That is karma. Now, what is Adi Bhuta and Adi Daiva and Adi Yajna? Okay, Adi Bhuta is nothing but the 5, anything made out of 5 elements, matter. Anything that you see which is matter is called Adi Bhuta, meaning so all the things which you see around us, which is inert, which is perishing, including this physical body, comes under Adi Bhuta, constantly perishing. Now, Adi Daiva is, if you want, and we want to think about it without getting into too much, confusion, is all the energy in the entire universe. When you see that the planets are revolving, or when you see that a cell is dividing, as subtle as that, to planets revolving, to all the movement in the universe, that movement of that energy everywhere in a huge scale is called Adi Daiva. I should not have included the cell. I should have only included, all the movement outside. It's Adi Daiva. That is, think of it as energy. All the energy which is happening outside is called Adi Daiva, totality of it. Now, Adi Yajna is in us. All starting from cell division, okay, to our breathing, to our circulation, all the energy movements, the thought, the chemical reactions, the electrical impulses that are happening within us, all those things which help us to experience this world is called Adi Yajna. So Brahman, we clearly understand, is that Satchidananda, imperishable, ultimate truth. Then Atma, the same in us, you and me, is called Atma. And then afterwards we said that the karma means the entire creation that has come into being plus its maintenance is called karma. And then all matter is called as Adi Bhuta. And Adi Daiva is this energy which is being maintained everywhere, the total energy in this entire beyond universes as well. And then functioning through individual, it is called Adi Yajna. Look, Arjuna, is anything excluded? You please think. Anything excluded in me? Everything is included. This is me in totality, he says. So now, after having explained that, now comes a question. What happens after death? This is the uniqueness of 8th chapter. Prayana Kala, at the time of departure of an individual from this world, what happens? Now, our question, if you remember the 2nd chapter, we said there were 3 things. One is this physical body. That will perish because it's made up of 5 elements. It just perishes after. So this body definitely dies. Then Atman, my nature, we know it's eternal, imperishable. So that does not die. So who's the one who has to have anything as far as, what happens after? Who has a question? It's not the physical body. It is not Atman. So what happens after death is only the question of a soul, the jiva. The jiva, the soul, which is our subtle instrument, the body, mind, intellect, all our, that instrument called the subtle body is the one which will leave this physical body to move to another, embodiment. What happens to that is the question. So Bhagavan now in 2 shlokas tells us what will happen at the time of death, what determines what will happen at the time of death. Antakale cha mamev
अन्तकाले च मामेव
स्मरन् मुक्त्वा कलेवरम्
स्मरन्मुक्त्वा कलेवरम्
यः प्रयाति समद्भावम्
यः प्रयाति समद्भावम्
याति नास्त्यत्र संशयः
याति नष्ट यत्र संशयः
यं यं वापि स्मरन् भावम्
यं यं वापि स्मरन् भावम्
यजत्यन्ते कलेवरम्
यजत्यन्ते कलावरम्
तं तं एवैति कौन्तेय
तं तं एवैति कौन्तेय
सदा तद्भावभावितः
सदा तद्भावभावितः.
So Arjuna, you want to know what happens after death? Now I'll tell you something. If somebody gives up their body thinking only about Bhagwan, right, will come to me. There's no doubt. If you die saying Krishna, Krishna, Rama, Rama, thinking only of that Lord, definitely you will attain me. Or if you remember God as all this also, you will attain me. That's what he says. But remember, ante yaha mati saha gatir bhavet. Whatever can be the last thought, who knows? Huh? Who knows what can be our last thought? We don't know. So that will determine where they will go next. So he says, if you think of me, there's no doubt. You will come to me. But who knows what is the last thought? So, when we study all this in our Upanishads, because remember, Bhagavad Gita is like the essence of the Upanishads. So sometimes these are hard to understand. That's why come our big stories, the Puranas, where what is sort of difficult concepts are demonstrated as though through stories. So there's a very beautiful story here to show that the last thought will determine what you're born as in the next life. So what is that story? It's called the story of Jada Bharata. It is found in Srimad Bhagavatam, where you also at some point will find Krishna stories. Earlier on, there's a story of this great king called Bharata. King Bharata was a great king. He ruled, for many years beautifully. And when the time came, he said, I have to go to the forest. I have to meditate. I have to become one with Bhagwan. So he does do all the right things and he goes to the forest. And when he goes to the forest, what happens? One day he's, bathing in the river and doing his Sandhya Vandan. And opposite bank, he sees a pregnant deer being chased by a lion. That deer, out of fear, enters into the water and, hitting a stone or rock, just falls dead. And in that, terrible stress, the baby fawn is born. And of course, Bharata is watching from the other side. He is a monk by that time. And he just cannot but help going and rescuing that baby fawn. He brings that fawn and he keeps it in his ashram and he starts taking care of it. And there's nothing wrong. He did the right thing by going and protecting that baby fawn, keeping it there, and he starts taking care of it. But now his whole preoccupation is with this baby fawn. Is the baby fawn fed? Is the baby fawn sleeping? Is the baby fawn safe? Is it, is it got its enough water, food? Whole thought, instead of meditating, and that's the purpose he came here, he forgets and he starts taking care of that little fawn. And even when he's sitting meditating, he's like, oh, I hope that fawn is not going anywhere. I hope that deer, So one day, of course, when the fawn got into be a, beautiful deer, it went off, following its instincts, it went off into the forest. And this Bharata was so preoccupied with it, he dropped his body, worried about, what happened to that deer. So he is born as a deer in his next life. So this is, of course, there's more to the story. Beautiful. It's a very beautiful story. So this Bharata, who's such a great person, whose mind was on Bhagwan, started thinking about only about a deer, and he's become a deer. This story is to show things like when the statements like this are made in our Upanishads, that the last thought will determine what your, next birth will be. This is to show that this will happen. So, whatever our last thought is, be it an experience, being it an object, or something, something quality or some person, we'll be born like that. So, it's very important that we have to, have our last thoughts right. Are Baba, who can remember what has to be a last thought? How do I make it, my last thought? Now, Bhagavan gives a very important instruction to all of us. He says, तस्मात् सर्वेषु कालेषु मामनुस्मरयुध्य च मय्यार्पितमनो बुद्धिः माम् एवैष्यस्य संशयम् He says, look, if you say last minute I'll think about you, Bhagwan, okay, I will definitely think about it, it will not happen. So what you do is sarveshu kaleshu mam eva smaran yudhya cha, he tells Arjuna, but for all of us, swadharma kartavya cha, all of us at all times remembering Bhagwan, we have to do our swadharma. So this is another important message of Bhagavad Gita, constantly remembering, Lord, we have to do our duty. Then he says, there's no doubt, you will come to me. You will come to me. So if we don't make this, a habit already, it will not happen. What we constantly think about, that we can recollect. Otherwise, you think we can do that? No. If we do all whatever types of thing and we hope that we can think of Bhagwan in the last minute, it's not going to happen. So in anything for that matter, if you want to achieve anything, you should have practiced, you should have got to that level. So practice is most essential so that you can absorb the mind in the truth at the time of death, right? This is the question, how can I remember you, Bhagwan? And this is what he's saying. So of course, Buddha's famous quote is, what we think we become. In fact, in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there's a whole beautiful mantra on this. At some point, I'll show you as well. So now Bhagavan says, okay, Arjuna, you want to get proficient in this, don't you? Yes, Bhagavan, I do want to get proficient. Why don't you meditate like this regularly? Now that you've heard all about me, you remember me as what? That omniscient, all-intelligent principle, that eternal principle who's been there forever and ever, who is the ruler of this entire universe, who is the substratum, the support of this world, who's all knowledge beyond darkness, that Chaitanya. I am that. You think like that and you fix your mind and you will come to me. You will get that supreme goal. Because otherwise you can't just do it at the time of death. Okay, if I practice this, what then should I do? He says, this is what you should do. When you practice meditation like this is what you should do, and then you will come to me. So he says, Om Ityekaksharam Brahma.
Om Ityekaksharam Brahma.
Vyaharan Mam Anusmaran.
Vyaharan Mam Anusmaran.
Yah Prayati Tyajan Deham.
Yah Prayati Tyajan Deham.
Sayati Paramam Gatim.
Sayati Paramam Gatim.
He says, You sit down, you fix your mind on what? Om. That Om is that supreme Brahman. It indicates that supreme Akshara Brahman, that which never perishes. That is me. That is me. That is me. You meditate like that on that Om. And if you do that and if you drop your body, there is no doubt. You are going to come to me. Arey Bhagwan, what? I should become proficient in meditation. I should meditate thinking you are that supreme, omniscient, eternal Brahman. That is represented by that Om. That is everything. And that's me. I should meditate like that. And if I keep doing this, at the time of death, if I think like this, I'm out, not caught in this chakra again, the samsara chakra, I don't get caught. Is that what will happen? Yes. Arey, Bhagwan, it's too difficult. Again, if I'm coughing, sneezing, breathing, gasping for breath, sitting like this and meditating, well, it has happened. Again, there are stories to show that there was a Raja Katwanga who used to serve, even Devatas would come for him for help. That Raja Katwanga once, Devata said, "You're so kind to us, Raja. What do you want? We'll give you anything." So Raja said, "No, I don't need anything. Just tell me how long my lifespan is." They looked and said, "Arey, just one day." That's all Raja Katwanga wanted. He just sat there, meditated in this manner, and he was out. But that's not possible for all of us. Bhagwan, what should we do? Don't you worry, he says. Bhagwan is always so kind to us. He says, Ananya chetaha satatam.
Ananyate cha ananyaye chetaye satatam.
Yo mam smarati nityashaha.
Yo mam smarati nityashah.
Tasyaham sulabha partha.
Tasyaham sulabha partha.
Nityayuktasya yoginaha.
Nityayuktasya yoginaha.
He's very considerate towards people who might struggle with meditation. He says, don't worry. All you do is you constantly remember me as you're doing your duty. You do your swadharma, as I've told you before. No problem. I'm easily available to you. And when you come to me, no more return. No more return to the samsara chakra, which is unpredictable. We might say everything's going fine now. What are you talking about of sorrows? But never know what will happen. Life has its challenges. Life has its ups and downs. We never know. So don't ever come back. You'll come to me only if you constantly do your swadharma. Now, how do we constantly remember Bhagwan as I'm doing my daily jobs? Okay, I'll do my swadharma, Bhagwan, I understand. But constantly remembering you, what does that mean? What does that mean? Most important is remember the Karma Yoga principles. Don't, be anxious about whatever's happened in the past. Don't be worried about what's going to come to you in the future. Where we are, do our very best. Give the 100% best attention and let our work be for the good of all. It might be just your family. Nobody is saying, every time good of all means go and stand in the middle of the world and start helping. That might not be where I start or where I head. So where you are, you do that. So that, more people in this way, with that attitude, keeping your mind balanced, if you can do, not looking for praise, but just doing our duty where we are positioned, where we took up that role, where we took that responsibility, do that well. That is actually being in the presence of God and offering everything to God. Because you're not thinking of anything for I, my at that time. And you're giving your best. Giving the best without thinking of anything, is the way of connecting with Bhagwan. So this is, you can say Rama, you can say Krishna if you want, or you can do this, a very helpful thing every morning. As you light the lamp in your altar, you just say, Lord, I'm your instrument. Use me and help me to do the best. Let me give the best. But you use me because I'm your instrument. And when you come to the end of the day, you can say, thank you, God, for giving me an opportunity, for being with me as I did my best in your seva. This is also enough, but that will help you to keep yourself in this mood of thinking of Bhagwan as we do our duty. Okay, this is what we should sometimes, because sometimes the question will come, how do I remember Bhagwan? Although I think I've told you about the Jewish person's rabbi's thing, bring Bhagwan to your workplace as well, okay? Because you take Bhagwan to the prayer hall, I mean, your work to the prayer hall, so you bring Bhagwan to the workplace as well. But anyway, this is, this is what you should understand. Don't think I can't think of Krishna, Krishna all the time. This is what we do, okay? So then, there is no return for sorrow, he says. Okay. Now comes a few topics again in the 8th chapter, which I'm not going to go in detail. This is not needed right now for all of us. When we study the Gita in detail, this might all be wonderful things to think about. He talks about the creation of this entire universe as well as his disillusion, saying that nothing new comes out. Nothing new, because matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's a recycle which happens. There are 8.4 million species, it is said. I have not counted it. All the different forms. They all go back to manifest to unmanifest, manifest to unmanifest. This is what happens. But what never changes is your and my true nature, that final Satchidananda. So then you think, then are we all these jivas always constantly stuck in these cycles of birth and death? And yes, although there is this Brahman, I have no clue. Is this what happens to me? Because we're talking about what happens to jiva after death, and now he's talking about the entire creation as well. He says, look, every action will give you results. Say I did a lot of wonderful things, religious rites. In those days, these were mainly religious rites, a lot of yajnas, pujas, for good of everybody. When I did that, what will happen? You will go, Bhagwan says, but you have not yet thought of Bhagwan. I'm just doing all the nice things, being the right person. He says you'll go by the Dakshinayana Marga. Again, if you don't want to remember all this, there is absolutely no worry. I'm just telling you what's given in 8th chapter. He says, in the Dakshinayana Marga, you'll enjoy all the great things of heaven. But when your punya is over, when you've exhausted all the results that you got through your merits, back again to samsara chakra. He says. Now you say, no. I am somebody who has, done meditation, but not yet understood my true nature, but I've done a lot of meditation and I have done a lot of great work, Bhagwan. I've engaged in very subtle things and beautiful things in life, and I've, arts and culture and music and various, teaching and all those things I've done without being very selfish. What will happen to me? He says, oh, you will go to the loka of creator, you'll go to that, he says, Brahma Loka. And from there, if your desire was that I just want to be one with Bhagwan, you will attain that. That is the Uttarayana Marga, he says. But look, do you want to come back again? Because there too, if you don't get your mukti, back again. So, if you just fix your mind in me, like I've been explaining through all the meditation, and think about me, you will come to me, and then there's no coming back, he says. So you can go by the Dakshinayana Marga. He never talks here about evil people, what happens to people who are not following Karma Yoga and all that. He doesn't. He just says people who still have desires, who are good people, who are doing right things, they will go through the Dakshinayana Marga, enjoy a lot of things, will come back to begin their cycle. Whereas the people who have done a lot of meditation and still completely not 100% united with Bhagwan, they will go to Brahma Loka, and from there they might just get a promotion because they're so deeply desirous of the Lord. They go to Uttarayana Marga, they attain me. And then, but if you just want me, you just think of me, you become that yogi, he says, and concludes the 8th chapter in this next 2 shlokas by saying, Naite Sruti Partha Janan.
Naite. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead.
Naite Suti Parth Janan
Yogi Muhyati Kaschana.
Yogi Mohati Kaschana
Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu.
Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu
Yoga yukto bhavarjuna.
Yoga yukto bhavarjuna.
So some people say, you know what, Bhagwan, Dakshinayana Marga, Uttarayana Marga. No, don't want any of those things. My dharma, whatever I have to do, I'll be thinking of you. I'll do all that prescribed karma yoga. I'll practice meditation. I'll think of you. You will come to me. You become that yoga yukta, that dhyana yoga and all I've mentioned all so far and told you about my true nature. If you meditate like that, you are mine. So you become that yoga yukta. And he says all the in your Vedas they promise so many great results, okay, which you can get by doing lot of yajnas and homams and all that, or sacrifices, or so much of tapas, given so much of dana. Beyond all that is this attain me. So those who are devoted to me, they want me alone, they will follow the path where they do their duty, keeping their mind in the Lord, practicing meditation, wanting nothing more except that Lord. If that's a soul goal, like an Olympic gold medal is my soul target, if I have that as the soul goal, and everything is geared towards that, comes to me. This is what happens to a jiva ultimately. Okay, so Bhagwan has explained everything. Sometimes his 8th chapter is recited after somebody passes away, but it's a chapter where we should actually reflect and say what I should do in life. Why should we wait till, when I'm dead and gone, when I can't even hear and somebody's playing this music or this chapter? These are all things that we should reflect on during life. This is important for us. No need to just play Bhagavad Gita when somebody is dead. We should all listen to the Gita even as we're living and see how to live life. That's most important. And through all this, Bhagwan is showing how we live life to our fullest, to our true potential. So this is Akshara Brahma Yoga, the 8th chapter. And this is most important here is do our Swadharma to the best of our ability, remaining in that, Lord, keeping that Lord in mind. And the question might still get us worried. How can I remember the Lord? But Bhagavan, through all the Puranas, he reassures us, if you lived a life like this, you don't worry. That Ante Narayana Smriti is my responsibility, Bhagavan says. I will make sure somebody will start singing Ram Nam at the time of your departure, so that once again, in the subconscious that dwells. Or somebody will come. I'll never forget now. I remembered. I had a sacred moment, I think, when we were able to be at the bedside of somebody who was passing away. And we had just gone to see this person because we had heard she had been elderly lady, had come out of the hospital. And we went to visit them, and she looked really, quite fine, actually. She was sitting on her bed. This was in their house. And in fact, she said, oh, take care of the guests. They've just mentioned my name and I said, take care of them. They've come, give them something. And so we're like, hey, she's doing perfectly well. So good to see this. And we turned our backs and we went right near the door when all of a sudden the whole family started crying loudly. And we realized the person was passing away, taking the last few breaths. And now the whole family was so distraught. They were all crying. And I don't know what happened for us. Immediately the Triambakam mantram came. And, Om Triambakam Yajamahe. So we started reciting it loudly. And all of a sudden the whole crying stopped. And everybody started joining us slowly in that prayer. And that person, left their, took their last breath. So Bhagwan will somehow make it happen. This is why he says, through so much of examples and stories, you don't have to worry. If you make this your life, practice, I will take care. You don't have to worry that I might not remember you. I'm here. Ante Narayana Smritihi, I'll take care of that, he says. In this beautiful chapter, Akshara Brahma Yoga, chapter 8. So just a little reminder to you all to have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We'll meet again on December 4th, and I'll conclude with the concluding mantra. ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ